Certified life coach and best-selling author. I help employees stop sexual harassment without quitting their jobs. And one of the ways I do that is by working with companies on creating healthy workplace cultures. And I do that because I think that having a healthy workplace culture is the way that we create better businesses, the way that we have more productive lives, the way that we can actually get the work that we love out into the world without having all these obstacles around us. So a question that I often get, and tell me if you've ever had this question before, if you've ever heard it. What do I do when I see something that seems inappropriate at work? Like, is it my job to step in? What if I don't know if it's really inappropriate? What if I see someone who looks uncomfortable, but they're actually not uncomfortable? How do I know if it's a problem? Other times people will say things like, I don't want to make it worse. If I see something that looks like a problem, I don't want to make things worse. So should I do nothing? It doesn't seem like, hey, Jacqueline, it doesn't seem like doing nothing is the right answer. But what if I do something and it makes it worse and then I become the problem? So what we end up doing is nothing. We don't step in and then nothing actually changes. So let me know, send an emoji if you have ever heard someone ask that question or even felt like that yourself. So I had this experience when I was an associate attorney in a law office. We had a law clerk, and one of the partners was, just kind of rude to him. And I remember there was this one day where we're sitting in a conference room, and the law clerk said something, and the attorney said something making fun of the way that the law clerk said it. It was something like, oh, did you swallow your tongue? I think is what he said. And it was so rude, I thought. And in that moment, I was like, I'm watching this younger attorney be hazed, and I didn't say anything. And then I just kept thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. And then I was like, you know what? I need to decide ahead of time how I'm going to respond when I see this kind of thing, because I don't want to tolerate that in my workplace. Even if the law clerk was fine with it, he kind of laughed it off. It didn't seem like a problem to him. I don't want that experience in my workplace because I think it's just unacceptable behavior. So the next time I saw it, all I did was say, whoa, hazing. And the attorney got so uncomfortable and was like, oh, no, we're all friends here. Like he didn't, I think, consciously see how his behavior was really rude, but when I called it out, he felt really uncomfortable about it and could see it. But I get these questions all the time when I'm presenting, like, how do I really know if someone else is uncomfortable? How do I really know if it's a problem or not? Like, am I making a big deal out of it? Am I like me by stepping in that situation? Am I making the law clerk feel more uncomfortable, right? Am I pointing him out more, making him more uncomfortable? I had a question from somebody recently who was in a workplace where there was a supervisor, two supervisors who were white, and one assistant who was a Black woman. And one of the white supervisors made a joke about police brutality. And the joke, read you totally, if you see something, say something. But that a lot of times is easier said than done, right? When we see it in the moment, a lot of times we're like, no, that didn't really happen. Did it really happen? I don't know. Should I have said something? And then it's like too late at that point, right? So we want to plan ahead of time how we're gonna respond. So in this particular situation, two white supervisors and one black woman assistant, both the two white women, they were both women also, no gender thing here. And one of the white supervisors made a joke about police brutality, and the Black woman assistant laughed at it, and the other woman supervisor was like, that is not okay. Like, that is not. And she was offended herself, but she also didn't want to be like the PC police. She didn't want, if the Black woman assistant wasn't offended, the white woman supervisor didn't want to make it into a big thing, right? And make her feel worse. So there are systems for how we handle this, and there's like a something called the 4Ds of bystander intervention that I want to tell you about. But then I think for each individual, I'm always reluctant to give a system for how we respond to these things, because I do think there are nuances in these situations. And I think that we have to listen to ourselves first, listen to what we want to tolerate in our workplaces first, and then come up with our own response that is natural to us and that works for us, right? And so the 4Ds of bystander intervention are direct, distract, delegate, and delay. So that's just, you can always remember the 4Ds. And so what they mean are, direct means you can make a direct intervention in the situation. You can step in and and redirect the attention to yourself and away from someone that's being targeted. Distract just means refocus the attention on something else. If you don't want to confront the issue directly. So what I did with the law clerk was direct. I said, whoa, that's hazing. And that was directing that energy away from him and onto myself. But it was encountering that situation in a more confrontational way than a lot of people are comfortable with. So distract is another system that's a little less direct than the first D, which is direct. So distract means like you basically say, what in the world could that be? Let's totally change the topic so that it's not weird anymore. And you just like take the energy away from the person who's being targeted and onto a completely different topic. You distract the person who is harassing the other person. Another is delegate. The third D is delegate. So delegate means you go to someone in authority in the situation. One example of this is if you're in a restaurant, like a lot of women experience predatory behavior from men in a restaurant. And so you can, if you're observing that happening, you can go to a manager in the restaurant and ask them to intervene rather than intervening yourself. So delegate, and this is true in the workplace too. So often you can go to HR rather than confronting a harasser directly and ask someone in authority to step in. And then delay is the fourth D. So direct, distract, delegate, delay. Delay is when you find something after the fact. If you realize after the fact, like I did with my law clerk in that one incident, I can go back to him and say, hey, was that okay? How do you feel about this? I want to check in with you. And it lets the person who's being targeted know that you observed it, that it's not okay, and that you want to have a response in the future that is in accordance with what they want, that is comfortable with them and that respects their wishes. So this is sort of, these are the tactics. If you see something and you know that it is harassment, you know that it's wrong, and you want to do something to intervene. But a lot of people say to me things like, well, I don't know, like sometimes I'll see, like men will say this to me, sometimes I'll see a woman laughing at a joke that I think is really sexist, but like I don't want to like make her uncomfortable or make the situation weirder by saying something, by doing one of the 4Ds, because I could get involved and I could make it worse. And I don't want to make it worse. And here's what I say to that. Any kind of harassment or discrimination that you observe that to you is harassment or discrimination is something in the environment that you do not want to tolerate. You don't have to identify somebody else as a victim for you to identify behavior in your environment that you do not want to tolerate, that you want to call out, that you want to distract from, or that you want to change. I was recently doing the Layla Saad's Me and White Supremacy workbook, and this was like actually ended up being kind of a hard process for me, even though I had asked myself all of the questions before. There wasn't like a new question in it that I hadn't thought about before, but it was a hard process because I kept having this resistance to really identifying the ways that white supremacy plays out in my environment. I noticed myself not wanting to see it or wanting to over blame myself for a systemic problem that we all are involved in, right? I wanted to be like, okay, well, I do call out racism, but not enough. Like, I need to go and actively get on people's pages and call them out for racism, but then that doesn't feel right to me and it doesn't feel effective to me. And then I'm like, oh no, then I'm not doing enough. And I had all this angst over it. And then I realized what I could do is be grateful for the workbook and for it raising these questions that I am on the side of, that I agree with. I agree that we should all examine our participation in white supremacy. And so I'm grateful to have these questions out there that I can ruminate on, and that I know I am always on the side of like fairness and equality, not on the side of white supremacy. And so I can be grateful to the questions and to what they bring up in me instead of resisting them and thinking that there's something wrong with me if either I do have an answer to the question or I don't have the answer to the question, which doesn't ultimately help resolve white supremacy, right? If I can be grateful that these questions are out there, that someone like Layla Saad is asking them, and that I can ask them in my own mind, then I am on the side of solving the problem. So what we want to do is be on the side of solving the problem, whatever it is. And so if you are identifying a problem for yourself, it doesn't have to mean that the victim that you're seeing is identifying the same problem. You are identifying behavior in your environment that you don't want to tolerate. So you want to like be asking this question: are you trying to save someone else, or are you trying to maintain a safe environment for yourself? Anytime you're trying to save someone else, you're kind of in their business. And so you do want to check in with them about whether they need someone to save them. Often we don't need someone else to save us, right? So that's a place of check-in. But if you're maintaining a safe environment that you want to tolerate for yourself, then you can take responsibility for the intervention that you want to make, right? So if you are trying to save someone else, if you think they're uncomfortable, but you're actually not seeing the situation as a problem, this is something that frequently happens. For example, in the workplace, it happens a lot of times with yelling. Yelling doesn't really bother me that much, but I know it does bother a lot of other people. And so I might want to step in a yelling situation when I know it's distracting and not effective for someone else. So what I do in that situation, what you want to do is you want to figure out a way to empower the person who is bothered in the situation. You want to be on the side of empowering them, not on the side of stepping in as a savior and empowering yourself. You already have power in that situation. And so you want to offer some empowerment to the person who is bothered, some deference to them, some kind of validity of their position, and align yourself with that person to help them step up and understand that they're safe in the environment. So you want to be asking yourself, not is this reasonable for this person to feel afraid in this situation, but how can I align with them and empower them so that they don't have to feel afraid, so that they can let it go. A lot of times what we do is we think, I'm not afraid of that guy, so no one should be afraid of that guy. And that's just not how human brains work, right? We all have varying triggers, varying fears, and they all are reasonable based on our experience and our history. You may not know someone's history of why they're afraid of someone that you're not afraid of, but it's enough that they're afraid, and then that's the place to empower that person to make a shift. So you want to ask yourself, like another thing that we do a lot of times is we say it's not that big of a deal. And the phrase, it's not that big of a deal, I think creates an enormous amount of chaos in the world. We use it as an excuse for apathy and resignation. And there is always a way for us to justify thinking something is not that big of a deal. I think instead, what we should be asking ourselves is, what if I cared about this? And what if I loved these people even? What if I wanted to bring safety and love to this situation? What would that look like? What if I did care? It's not that big of a deal, because you can always find a reason why anything is not that big of a deal. And it just is not the way that we change society or make a shift when it comes to harassment and discrimination. Another question to ask is, how would I respond in this situation if I was watching children interact? How would I intervene then? Because that helps us identify where we're holding ourselves back because of our own fear, because of what we think other people will think about us, or how they'll respond to us keeping our environment safe. What if they were children? How would I respond? Yeah, Ritu, safety and love. I love safety and love. And so, like, also ask yourself, what if the victim of for the person that's targeting, the victim of the behavior, doesn't have a problem with it? What if they feel totally empowered in this situation? Does that make it okay to you? Because there may be something in there that you want to resolve that's an obstacle for you, and everybody has varying behavior that they're willing to tolerate and behavior that they're not willing to tolerate. You get to decide your own, and it doesn't really matter if the other person's feeling victimized if it's something that you want to impact. What do you want to expect from your environment? So the biggest thing I see as an obstacle to this, a lot of times we know this stuff, we know what we want to do, and then we still don't take action. And that is the biggest place where I help people, and where I even help people be an ally, be someone who impacts their environment, to create an actually healthy workplace culture, not just a workplace culture that's like tolerable, right? That we want to have workplaces that are productive, where we get our work done, where we bring important work into the world and make an impact in the world, make it better, evolve, right? And so what do you want to expect from your environment, and what's holding you back from creating the exact work environment that you want? The answer is always our thoughts and our expectations and how the feelings that they create in our body, right? That is always the answer of what's holding us back. So if you are ready to take action, if you want to create a healthy workplace culture, we need to talk. I am going to drop a link to my book in the comments so that you can download a free copy if you want that. But if you don't want to wait to read the whole book to create a healthy workplace culture, send me a message and let's talk for sure. Thanks everyone for listening. How do I get out here? There we go.